Welcome everyone to the virtual college fair for all Minnesota students sponsored by the Minnesota Association for College Admission Counseling and StriveScan. Thank you for joining us today. A few housekeeping notes before we get started. You can use the Q&A button at any time throughout the presentation to ask questions. If your question does not get answered live, the transcript will be sent to the panelists to be able to follow up with you. Your camera and microphone are turned off, so the panelists cannot see or hear you. And keep in mind, this is just one of the many sessions being provided by MACAC and StriveScan. So please check out the full schedule as well as all recordings of sessions at mn-acac.org. And with that, I will turn it over to the panelists.
Hi, everyone. The six of us are very excited to be with you today to talk about an important topic for many of us, and hopefully to you as well. We want to talk about demystifying your college essays. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All of us will be able to give you some information today, and we hope that that's really helpful. We also hope that you will ask lots of questions. And that this can hopefully, if writing the college essay brings some anxiety for you, we hope that this will help kind of take some of that anxiety down as well. But like I said, this is a favorite for many of us of a topic. My name is Carrie Weeks, and I'm an Associate Director of Admission at Gonzaga. And I love reading college essays. I love learning more about you. And so we're going to present some tips for you that we hope will be helpful. Know that we don't expect perfection, but we do hope that these tips will be helpful to you.
All right, so I am going to go ahead and talk to you all first. My name is Shannon Crone, and I am an Assistant Dean of Admissions at St. Olaf College in Northfield, Minnesota. And I would just echo everything Carrie said. I think that reading essays is such a fun part of this job. And I have to confess that when I was a student, I also really loved writing college essays, even though I think it can be a little bit stressful, which is what we're talking about. I also think it's such an opportunity to have a little bit of fun and to do some really meaningful personal reflection, which is kind of what this first slide is all about. What I would start by saying is that I think one of the reasons that you are all in a good position right now is that you're getting an early start on this. And I think sometimes one of the biggest things that can be difficult about writing an essay, whether it's the Common App or supplements or really any kind of writing for your college applications, is when you get into a little bit of a time crunch and you don't necessarily have time to let your ideas fully ruminate. So I think taking the time to do it, like you've already all start doing, but to just kind of let your mind wander a little bit, brainstorm, try out a couple of different ideas. You don't have to decide on anything right away. And that way I think you can really figure out what is going to be most important to you and most exciting to talk about. So when you're taking that maybe one step further and you're really sitting down to start drafting things after that initial brainstorm stage, I think some of the other things that are good to keep in mind is this idea that we really want to know you better. Probably the biggest advice that I give to students when I'm talking to them about the college essay is that there is so much pressure, I think, to come up with a really profound and amazing topic. I think there's this idea that the perfect topic is out there. And I think with that comes some pressure to be really original. And one of the best pieces of advice that I heard is that sometimes trying to be original or kind of putting all of your energy towards that idea is not a very good use of your time, right? Because so many things have been done. We have all read so many college essays, and that's not even really what we're interested in, right? What we really want to know is more about who you are. So I would encourage you, instead of focusing on being profound or being original, really try to think about what can be specific to you and what is unique about you, rather than thinking about how it will compare to other essays in the bunch. And I think that specificity point is really important, because then you can also avoid things like cliches or things like that, which I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about. And the very last thing before I turn it over is, I think this idea of writing about something you're passionate is also so exciting, right? Like if you're excited to write about it, we are going to be excited to read about it, and we are going to be able to sense that from you. And that is, again, what really makes it great, rather than like, and I think this is with the whole demystifying idea, right? Rather than like we're going in with some agenda hoping to read something. We just really want to hear from you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Grace Fisher. I'm an Associate Dean of Admission at Reed College in Portland, Oregon. And our next tip is continuing from what Shannon was saying, using this as an opportunity to let your personality shine through and show us who you are, show us a little bit about how you think, not just through what you choose to write about, but also how you write about that. I love reading and there are, that means there's no universal voice, I would say. I love reading a funny essay, but if you haven't written a funny essay before, if you're not usually a sort of jokey person, then I don't think your college essay is the time to try on that hat necessarily, because it won't sound like you. It'll sound like you're trying too hard. It'll sound like, it'll just come off maybe a bit stilted. That said, if you really enjoy playing with language and having little humorous turns of phrase, that enjoyment will come through to us as well. A serious essay can work really well as well if that tone makes sense for who you are and what you want to talk about. I've read, one of my favorite essays was actually in the format of a student doing a like ancient Latin and Greek, sort of a classically style rhetoric, exploring their own personality. And that worked because it was a style they knew so well. So feel free to be creative. And if you enjoy the way you're writing, if you feel like the way you're writing is natural to you, that will come through and more easily immerse us in what you're trying to tell us. That said, some people are not the most creative writers, and that's okay. It's more important that you sound like you than you sound like the most creative person we've ever met, right? The final bullet point here on ideological topics is, letting your personality shine through is really important, but also be aware that you don't know your audience. Your essays can be read by a lot of different people. At a lot of schools, it'll be read by at least 2, and then often it might go before a whole committee of application readers another time who might all take a look at it. And you don't know our personal histories, you don't know what we've experienced, you don't know our own sort of likes and dislikes. And of course, we all try our best to minimize our own biases and be aware of them. But, and it's awesome to see students taking a strong stand, but you want to be careful that you're not going to alienate your reader by attacking something that they might hold really dear. So next, I think we'll hear about the hook.
Lindsay, you're on.
I'm so sorry. I had a different slide for this one. My apologies. My name is Lindsay Poisson, and I am an admissions counselor at Seattle University. I'm so happy to be joining you today. The hook is one of my favorite parts. So this is really how you draw the reader in. So again, as Shannon mentioned, you might want to brainstorm this. You might want to go through a few drafts. You might want to try again and have edits from other people. But this is really the way to engage your reader. So really try to think of different things that that engage you, or as we had mentioned, you're passionate about, and you can go at this from a lot of different ways. You might think of engaging your senses. It could be starting in the middle of a story. It might be, again, a quote or a song lyric. It could be more of like, not necessarily an academic like thesis statement, but this might have some sort of a statement at the end of your first paragraph, and that might be your hook. But your hook is so important because it's oftentimes the place that you return to at the end of your essay. So giving your hook lots of time and thought. I like to give some examples here too, some of my favorite hooks, as well as some of my like favorite essays in general. One was this essay about a student who had always wanted to work at Starbucks, even as a little kid, and they kind of went into how they would play with, like make their own little barista machine. And then their hook was that they finally got a job, and they were really nervous about it. It was their very first job. And then they circled back to this hook as a learning experience, and how they're excited to step into college, and all of the skills that they learned from that fear of entering into this first job, and how they hope to use those skills as they enter into college and meet new people. So your hook can be, again, that place that you return to. It's a kind of launches off your essay. And it's a great way for you to get really, really creative. And again, think of lots of different options, lots of edits, and maybe even some other eyes to look this over. But that's all from me. So I'll move it along to the next presenter.
It's me again. I think I'll also say, Lindsay mentioned other eyes, and I think other eyes are really great. We'll talk more about proofreading later. And I think having other people look at your essay can be great for both testing out the way it's written and what you write about. But I also think it's important not to let them change the essay so much that it's not you anymore. Anyway, also you want to make sure you're answering the question. One of my ways of thinking about this is, if you haven't tried writing the Common Application essay yet, you only have 650 words. And that's about a page single-spaced. I think of it as having maybe a minute to get to know a person, maybe a little longer. If you opened your door at home to your bedroom and I had like 1 minute to try to memorize everything in that room, I would fail. That would be overwhelming. I would be, if you were looking at my room, you'd be like, oh, there's some weird statues and some art that I can't tell what that is, and the bed isn't made, right? And then I would slam the door and you'd not remember a single thing about me, probably. But if you had a minute to just look at one little corner of my room, to look at the bookshelf and the top shelf where I have all these little figurines, you probably learn a lot more and get really interested in why I have all these weird owl figurines and stuff, right? So the essay is a time when you're trying to make yourself known to us and you're trying to make yourself memorable. And it's much easier to remember something small that's explored really deeply rather than a list of things. Especially considering that your essay comes the page after the Common Application activities list. So we just read a whole list of all the things you do. So during your essay, it's a really great idea to try to narrow it down quite a bit and focus on one theme, one idea, one activity, one person, something like that in your life. Answer the question, but the nice thing is there's also a question in the Common Application that says, write the essay of your choice. That's totally fine, go for it. Finally, on this last point, for supplemental essays and scholarship essays, when you write your main application essay for the Common App, that goes to every school you apply to. But for individual colleges, they might have you write an extra essay that's just for them. So you want to use that space to directly answer the question, because this is a question the college asked, so they must think it's pretty important. And we can tell when it was written for someone else's essay question. And use it as an opportunity to not just talk about the college and not just talk even about yourself, but what I think can be really effective is making the connection between who you are and what you're looking for and what you see the college as offering. If you can make that connection, if you can help me envision you on our campus in our classrooms, that's going to make me all the more excited to have you here.
Hello, I'm Stephen Batcher. I'm the Regional Director of Admission at St. Mary's University in Winona, Minnesota. So I'll talk to you about the next couple slides here. So the first one is being aware of your tone. So you want to show confidence in humility and kind of know that balance. Also talking about not, avoid whining or complaining, but talk about overcoming obstacles. So it's definitely advantageous for you to possibly talk about an obstacle you just overcame, or something that has happened in your life that's really kind of set you apart or changed your path. And I think, Grace, you talked about earlier, like you don't know necessarily who you're writing to, but someone this year wrote their essay about getting a haircut and how that haircut changed their life. Something I'd never thought I'd ever read a college essay about was someone getting a haircut, but like that's what it was. That's what was important to that person. I was able to read through that and understand why they decided to choose that as an option. And I think it's also important to make that essay, especially the ones that are on the Common App or maybe your generic essays, make it conversational, because it's going to help you write better, write to the person, that human that's going to be reading on the other end. And a lot of professional or a lot of writers and college professors will talk about that as making that writing conversational, because you're not writing an academic piece to us. We're not reading your academic, thesis. It is an essay about yourself. So make it conversational. And again, like we've all talked about, show your personality, tell us who you are. And again, just showing us using examples. So yeah, don't just write down a bunch of lists about things. Don't generalize, go into more depth like we talked about earlier. Don't feel like you need to use cliches or, steal things that you may think we want to hear from you. It's just help us read along with you, help us be able to envision what you're talking about. And then refer back to the beginning at the end, that makes us know that you're coming to an end in your essay. It rounds out your story. Make sure that your story also does have an ending to it. There have been essays that I have read that the beginning is filled with a lot of great obstacles that they talk about or challenges, but then they never got to what happened to those challenges. It was just that, hey, here were my challenges. I faced them. I hope, it was almost like, I hope you realize that I faced these challenges so I can succeed at your college, but they never really explained how they succeed in overcoming their challenges. So again, refer back to the beginning at the end, and it closes out your essay and helps us get to that completion.
Okay, my name is Karin Smith. I am the Regional Admission Manager at Beloit College in Beloit, Wisconsin. For all y'all in Minnesota, we're not that far away from you, just a little ways down the bottom of the state in Wisconsin. I volunteered to be part of this panel because essays are my favorite part of my job. And having worked in college admissions for twice as long as most of the students in the room, seriously, I have read a lot of essays. And I think that many of you are way at the very beginning of this whole process. You're asking great questions, and we're going to answer those questions for you. And we're going to do our best to help you understand what your process is. But I want to mention a few things about your essays that we hope you will think about. When you apply to a college, you are going to give us, on paper, so to speak, information about yourself, both as a student, as an individual. When we are reviewing students' applications for admission, we're asking ourselves, most of us, two questions. Do we believe that the information that the student has given us from an academic standpoint allows us to believe that that student can be successful in our classrooms? The other question that many of us are asking is, would we want to invite that student to live with us for the next 4 years, right? Because you're leaving, most of you, where you are, where you're familiar, where you've been, where people know you, and you're going someplace of your choosing, right? And you are going to live there in all likelihood. And so you're going to contribute to our communities that we care a great deal about. And so we do want to know about you more than just from an academic standpoint. Your essay is, as I mentioned, in my opinion, the best part of your application. It's also the only part of your application that you control in the moment. So let me say that again. It's the only part of your application that you have complete control over in the moment. So let's think of the other parts of your application, your transcript. If ninth grade wasn't so great, you can't go back and undo that, right? Your extracurricular activities. If you're not already the best voice in the choir at your school, you're not suddenly going to be. You cannot predict what your recommenders might say about you, right? Standardized test scores, well, that's kind of a moot point, but for those of us who review standardized test scores, or you may send standardized test scores, you can take that test a gazillion times and it's not going to change that much. But your essay is something that you control in the moment. And as all of my fellow panelists have said, we're trying to get to know you, nobody else, you. And so, you know, sometimes I think, well, so what's the problem with that? Like, what's the big deal? Right? I get to talk about me. Yeah, we don't do that in this culture. We don't do it very well at all, ever. It's just not something that we do. We also tend not to take the time to really sit down with ourselves and have a good think about who we are. We hear what other people tell us. We think maybe, right? When was the last time any of you sat by yourself in a quiet place and reflected on who you are as an individual? Most of us don't do that. And that's what we're asking you to do. We're asking you to serve up to us, you, which is like, wait, what? This is crazy. We're not looking for your standard 5-paragraph essay. This is something you likely haven't done before. Maybe some of you will be in classes at school that'll help you with this process. That would be great. But it really is all you. So one of the ways that I encourage students to think about this is, let's say you got into an elevator with like the coolest person in the world that you've always wanted to meet, right? And you're in that elevator and you're on the top floor and you're going to be in that elevator with this person to the bottom floor. 2 minutes. In that 2 minutes, what would you tell this totally amazing, cool person about yourself, right? So this amazing person says to you, hey, I'm so-and-so, to which of course you say, yeah, no kidding. Tell me about yourself. What would you say, right? Think about it along those lines and you might start to come up with some ideas. You want all of us to read that first couple sentences in your essay and want to get to the bottom. Every year I read too many essays where I read the first few sentences, I skim, I go to the bottom and I'm like, yeah, I know what this person is going to say. They're repeating things that are already in their application. They're telling me things that aren't giving me a picture of who they are as an individual. And so you do get to be a little creative and a little crazy because that may be who you are. There are also some of us who place a greater emphasis on essays than others. And that's an okay question to ask, right? When you're meeting with college representatives like us, you should and can ask, tell me what gets the greatest emphasis when you're reviewing a student's application. Some of us work at writing intensive schools, and so students' essays are really important to us. Others, maybe not so much. And so this is where you get to ask about the individual school. So the final thing I'm going to do is to tell you a story on this slide anyways, and I have another slide I get to talk about. Carrie got nervous. She's like, she's forgetting. No, I didn't. My favorite essay of all time, ever, right? And I've done this again a long time. And so there was a student who was applying to the school that actually I work at right now, who was very important in my life because he was being recruited to play a sport. He was a very fine athlete by my husband of 1 year, right? Really a great athlete. Somebody I heard my husband talk about a lot. This kid is so good. He's going to change the flavor of our team. Great. But I also knew that he was a little bit academically on the bubble, right? He wasn't a slam dunk admit for my school at the time. And so I had met with him and I had talked with him and I had said, you know, your essay is going to be really important. It can tell the admissions committee you're serious about our school and you are indeed a good student. And so, you know, please take time with your essay. Okay, great. So his application comes in, and this was back in the day when it actually came in on paper. And I was also very new in admissions, and I took it in my office and I opened it up and I flipped to the essay, and it was 1.5 solid pages of words with some spacing, but no punctuation. And I closed the essay, walked out of my office, went for a long walk and thought, well, not only is this kid not going to get in, my husband may say, see ya, right? So there I was like, oh. So I took a walk, I went back, I opened it up again, and I read the first line. It went a little bit more than a line. And the first line said, I'm going to describe 3 minutes of time. And this happened to be the 3 minutes of time before my team took the floor at the state basketball playoffs, final game. And when I'm thinking, I don't think in punctuation. I was like, okay, maybe there's a chance. And his essay was brilliant because woven through the essay was time. 2 minutes and 30 seconds to go, 2 minutes to go, 1 minute to go, right? And so the reader was like, you know, you're getting breathless. He talked about his family and the fact that he was the youngest of 3 boys. He was going to be leaving home. What the heck were his parents going to do every Friday and Saturday night now that there was no basketball, right? And yes, he missed his brothers, but you know, what was this going to be like? He talked about his teammates. Many of them he had played with for a long, long time, and he knew that none of them were going to go to the same college. And what was that going to feel like? And then he wove in very technical elements of what he was going to have to do in this game. And not only did I race to the end, I reread it, and I knew about this student when I was done. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And then I asked him, I said, you know, was this hard for you to write? And he's like, no. He said it was hard to really think about how I was going to write it, but once I knew how I was going to write it, no, it wasn't hard. And I think many of us have intimated that it shouldn't be hard, right? It should not be a hard essay to write. Okay. All right. Next slide, please. All right, grammar matters. It does, as I just told you, or at least I thought it did, except in this student's essay it didn't, but it was intentionally, it didn't. I have read too many essays this year where students are talking to me with text speak. And as one of our panelists said earlier, you need to know who your audience is, right? I did not grow up texting. I really don't want to have to either say to my own children or try to find on the internet what something in text speak means. I mean, it's a lesson, I can do it, but you want to be careful about that. I also suspect that I've read a good number of essays this year that students have written on their phones. You might be able to do it. You actually might be able to do it pretty well. I would encourage you not to make that the only place where you have written that essay. You want to write it and then edit it, fine. But when you've written it only on your phone, we know. Right? Use an active voice, not a passive voice. Right? What are you doing, not what's being done to you. Be concise. That's a hard part of this. You get 650 words, sometimes less, depending on the application that you're completing. And so you want to pay attention to that. Yes, avoid starting every sentence with I. It is about you, but that typically leads to not a very exciting essay to read. Proofreaders, yes, by all means. There is no place in the essay, in the application that says you cannot have someone check your work. So why would you not? Pick someone who will do a good job of not editing your words, but making sure that your grammar and your spelling and all that good stuff is correct. And then I think the last point is a great point that I've mentioned many times before. Write it, put it away, don't think about it for a while, and then bring it back out and read it again. And hopefully you'll read it again and be like, dang, all right, I'm good. Or you may make some changes along the way, but that's fine as well. Thank you.
Okay, so this is Carrie again from Gonzaga in Spokane, Washington. And your last tip or number one tip here is something that several have mentioned. Karen especially talked about. This is really your opportunity to take control. This is an essay probably unlike other essays that you have written, because it does ask so much for you to be reflective about who you are or something you really enjoy, to have that tightness of focus, like has been mentioned before. But it's something that you get to control in the moment, as Karen said as well. And outside of the other pieces of either your application for admission, or if you're talking about a scholarship application, you are also very much in control of what you put into that and how your readers will see you. Similarly with supplements, and this has really become a big pet peeve of mine over the years. I have read many essays as well, and love it because it does give me the opportunity to get to know you and to learn a little bit about your life and what's important to you. And it makes me really sad when a student uses our little supplement, which is like an 8 to 10 sentence supplement question, and they just copy paste from the essay straight into that supplement. It not only does it show, okay, they didn't really spend a lot of time on actually answering this other question that we really wanted a student to answer, but also I feel like it's a missed opportunity. Because you should look at each of the sections of the application as opportunities to share with us and with all of your readers kind of who you are and what you bring to your college experience. And that is many things. And so when students miss that opportunity, when they just repeat what they've already said in an essay, in a supplement, that just makes me really sad for the student. And sad for me because I didn't get to learn something new about that student as well. So like, for example, if you really love to play soccer and you have played for a long time and your teammates are your family and all of that, you can write your essay about that experience. But then in the supplement question, what other aspect of you do you want to share with the college, or if it's 2 questions on a scholarship application, just make sure that you're making each of those different. I kind of said this in the very beginning, but we also, we want a good example of your writing. We want to have a sense that you can write well, that you can communicate your ideas well, but we're not looking for a Pulitzer Prize winning essay. And we don't want you to be using a thesaurus as you are writing your essay. We want it to sound like you. And that is really our goal with that. I love reading essays. I love getting to know students. And every year as we read college applications, I feel humbled and that I get to know students and their stories, and that I get to know you a little bit better as you share some of your stories with us. And that's a very humbling and inspiring place. I learn so much from 17 and 18-year-olds every year. It's part of what it makes this profession so rewarding. So I want to thank you for your attention with the presentation, and I'm going to move to another slide that will show you all of our contact information. So if you want to take a screenshot of that, or if you want to go ahead and take a picture of it or something, I'll leave it up for just a little bit, and then I'm going to take it down so you can see all of our faces as we continue with the Q&A. And I'll let Karen run our Q&A.
Sure. Okay, good. There's some great questions, and Grace Fisher, you've been like madly answering them throughout, but there are a few we're going to talk about here. And one is, do you have to write an essay for starting PSEO, which is post-secondary education opportunities in Minnesota? This is a Minnesota thing. That's a question. Well, does anybody on the panel know the answer to that question? No.
I can speak just very, very broadly. I think my understanding is that most of the time you don't, probably for the community college, but that sometimes your high school might have an essay that you write to kind of enter into the program on their terms. So I think it kind of depends.
Right, and it's an answer you should be able to get from your high school counselor, right? They're gonna give you a better answer than we will.
And they'll also, you can't go anywhere for PSEO, just FYI. That's also something that comes up that we will hear about. We're in Winona, so if you go to school at Burnsville, you can't take PSEO classes. So talking to your high school counselor will help you, because then you will have to probably do some at said college that's close to you. So just an FYI on that.
Right, good. A couple of students asked, will you be able to see this presentation afterwards? Oh, yes, you will. It's being recorded and it will be housed on the MACAC website. And I believe you'll get an email afterwards letting you know where to find it. Here's a great question that I think the panelists can answer together. And that is there a process we would recommend for brainstorming ideas for college essays? Anyone?
I have a recommendation, which is I think I have a couple of ways that I often recommend people to start. One is if you look at the common application questions, and this is actually goes to Andrew's question as well, can we see the essay topics before August 1st? If you're using the common application, for the last 5 years, I think the questions have been basically the same. Maybe 5 or 6 years ago, they removed one, which was great because I didn't like it. And
me neither.
So you can look at what the questions are right now. You can just Google common application questions, you'll find them. And often I think you'll look through those and you'll find one that kind of, you feel like immediately oh, I have an answer to that. I have something I'd talk about. Start writing those ideas down. But also don't sleep on the questions that don't immediately spark a response. I ended up writing my college essay about when I looked at the questions, the one question I was like, nope, never gonna do that one. I had an idea right before I was falling asleep, and I wrote it down on a pad of paper that I started keeping near my bed, because that's when I have all my best ideas. It ended up being my essay. Another technique I recommend, and then I'll let other people take it over, is what I think can make a really effective essay is if you're having trouble figuring out a topic, like an event or a person or an activity or a place, another way to come at it is to think about values. Think about what's important to you. What's the thing you want to be known for? Do you feel like your best quality is that you're trustworthy, or that you're really curious, or that you're a loyal friend? Think about what is most important about you. What's your greatest trait, or a trait that you like to show off, and think about, okay, what's a story I can tell to illustrate that? And that might be also another kind of cool way to think about essay topics. But anything else that my peers have to offer?
Just to add on to that, Grace, I think that's a great idea to start with values and strengths. But one recommendation I have is to don't shy away from the mundane too. I've read so many great essays about the ritual of making a specific breakfast every morning, or something that is just your day-to-day. A beautiful story can come out of that as well. And again, think of these examples or what you're linking it to. It can be more anecdotal or something that is could be like how you have grown or a lesson learned. So this will come in pieces and in chunks. And one other recommendation I have is feel free to throw away ideas or to start over. Again, you are starting this so early. There's a reason why we say brainstorm and create lots of drafts, because that's okay, and give yourself permission to be like, don't love that idea, I'm going to ditch it, or I'm going to put it on a shelf. So have a little grace through this process too. Know that it will be it'll be like a little challenging at points, like we've said it a few times already.
Yeah, I think it's important to think about things that tell good stories. You know, we all love to hear good stories. We love to read stories. That helps make things memorable. So if you have some stories in your life that you want to you know, like, oh yeah, this particular experience that I had, that might make a good essay. And you can kind of then start working around that and see if it really does make a good essay. Or as like Lindsay said, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But yeah, you've got lots of time. So you can really play with a lot of different ideas.
The other thing I'm going to mention quickly, somebody asked, are there due dates? Oh yeah, you know, you're going to want to pay attention to our deadlines, right? So that's going to become a part of your life. What are the deadlines for the various schools you're applying to? But the other thing I want to mention is for all of you, you have been given this really yucky gift, so to speak, of the pandemic, right? And experiencing some things that students in classes ahead of you and hopefully behind you forever, never experience again. And I go back to Stephen's comment about reading an essay about getting a haircut. Getting a haircut was not a big thing a year ago. And hopefully it will not be a big thing in a year, right? And so going in to get that haircut was all of a sudden now a thing. And so I think you can talk about some things that you had the opportunity to experience as students who were studying differently than any class before and hopefully any class behind you. And if you can work that into an essay that tells us about you, go for it. Yeah, absolutely. Other questions? Oh, as a freshman, when should I start writing my college application essay? Oh, you have time. Is what I would say. But the panelists may feel differently. Yeah.
I would hope that a person would experience a lot of personal growth and change between freshman year and senior year. So you can definitely put this out of your mind for at least a little bit. I would say.
Absolutely.
I think this will be our last question. Relating to scholarship essays, do we write them about ourselves, like the panel has described for the college app essays, or do we write them about something different? Somebody want to?
I can start this one and give a quick answer.
Yeah, go ahead, Shannon.
Oh, sorry. I think it will depend on the question. I think generally a lot of scholarship essays are going to be looking for similar things as the Common App or supplemental questions where it's asking you to draw an experience and tell us a little bit about it. But I think as long as you're paying attention to the prompt, you're going to be good. But also as a general rule, personalization is probably always going to help you, you know?
Yeah, and I would just add to that. So if the question is about, you know, write about someone who inspires you, you can write about that person, you write about the traits, but you want to make sure you're writing about the relationship you have with that person so that we can see why it's you who's inspired by this person. And we get to know you a little bit more. And it's not just totally focused on that individual, because we want to know you and not only this person who inspires you as well.
We're done. She's back.
Perfect. Awesome. Great job, everyone. Perfect. And thank you all to the participants who have joined us today as well. Keep in mind, if your question did not get answered, all the questions will be sent to the panelists, so they'll be able to follow up with you. When you close this window, there will be a very short 4-question survey. We'd be really happy if you filled that out. We appreciate any and all feedback you have to give. Also, keep in mind, this is just one of the many sessions being offered, so you can view the full schedule of sessions as well as all the recordings of the sessions at mn-acac.org. Thank you and have a wonderful day.